Rain slashed the windshield like bullets as Alara Voss threw herself into the back seat of the first unlocked car she found, her wedding dress clinging to her skin like a second baptism. The silk was ruined, the night was ruined, everything was ruined except the single fact that mattered. She wasn't going back. Not to Marcus. Not to that altar. Not to a life where her last name would be the only thing about her that mattered. She pressed her palm against her mouth to muffle her breathing, listening to the shouts growing closer outside. Then the driver's door opened. A man slid behind the wheel, tall, dark suit, movements sharp and economical. He didn't start the engine. He didn't look back. He simply said, in a voice like gravel smoothed by ocean tides, "You picked the wrong car, sweetheart. If you're ready to watch power shift hands, loyalty turn deadly, and a runaway bride claim a throne built on blood, stay with me through every twist. Like this video, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and let's begin." The man didn't turn around. That was the first thing that struck Alara as wrong. Most men would have twisted in their seat, angry or confused or leering. Most men would have demanded to know what the hell she thought she was doing, dripping wedding dress residue all over their leather interior. This man just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, utterly still, in a way that made her skin prickle. "I said," he repeated, quieter this time, "you picked the wrong car." Alara's breath came in shallow gasps. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see flashlight beams cutting through the downpour, voices barking orders she couldn't quite make out over the thunder. Marcus's men. They'd be thorough. They'd check every vehicle in the lot, every shadow, every possible hiding spot. She had maybe 2 minutes before they reached this row. "Please," the word came out hoarse. Just give me a minute. They'll pass. I'll get out. You'll never see me again." "No," the man said. "I won't." Before she could process what that meant, the engine roared to life. The car lurched forward with enough force to slam her back against the seat. And then they were moving. Not away from the searchers, but directly toward them. Alara's scream died in her throat as the vehicle's headlights flooded the parking lot, illuminating 3 men in dark rain jackets who scattered like roaches when the beam hit them. The driver didn't slow down. If anything, he accelerated. "What are you doing?" Alara grabbed the back of his seat, her knuckles white. They'll what?" He took a corner hard enough that she slid across the back seat, her wet dress tangling around her legs. "Shoot at Dominic Cruz's car? I don't think so." The name hit her like cold water. Dominic Cruz. Everyone in the city knew that name, even sheltered girls from old money families who weren't supposed to know about men like him. Crime boss. Ghost. The man you didn't mention at dinner parties because even speaking about him felt like invoking something dangerous, and she was currently bleeding mascara all over his back seat. "Oh, God." Alara pressed herself against the door. "Oh, God, I'm sorry, I'll..." "Sit back." His eyes found hers in the rearview mirror for the first time. They were dark, almost black in the low light, and they assessed her with the same detached interest someone might give a stray dog. "And put your seatbelt on. You're not going through my windshield if I have to brake." She fumbled with the belt, her hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to click it into place. Behind them, the parking lot was receding into darkness, the searchers left standing in the rain like statues. No one followed. No one would dare. Dominic took another turn, this one smoother, and they merged onto a highway that cut through the industrial district. Street lights flickered past in rhythmic intervals, painting his face in alternating shadows and amber light. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features that suggested brutality could be a deliberate choice rather than a default setting. "Where are you taking me?" Alara's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Somewhere dry." He adjusted the rearview mirror, checking behind them with the casual efficiency of someone who always expected pursuit. "You can explain yourself when we get there. I don't owe you an explanation. You're sitting in my car in a wedding dress at midnight during a thunderstorm. Yeah, you kind of do." Alara looked down at herself, at the ruined silk and lace that had cost more than most people's cars, at the tiny seed pearls that were probably shedding all over his floor mats, at her bare feet because she'd kicked off the heels somewhere between the church and the parking lot. She looked like a drowned ghost. She looked like exactly what she was. A runaway bride with nowhere to go and no plan beyond anywhere but here. "I didn't know it was your car," she said finally. "I just needed to hide." "From? Does it matter?" "It does if they're going to come looking for you." Alara bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. Marcus would come looking. Marcus's father would come looking. The entire Thorne family empire would mobilize because she wasn't just a runaway bride. She was a broken contract, a failed merger, a public humiliation that needed to be corrected before word spread beyond tonight's guest list. "They'll look," she admitted, "but they won't find me." Confident. Desperate. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Dominic's face. "At least you're honest." They drove in silence for another 10 minutes, the city proper falling away behind them as they climbed into the hills where the old estate sat behind gates and walls. Alara had been to parties up here before. Stiff, formal affairs where everyone smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes. But Dominic turned off the main road onto a private drive she'd never noticed before, and the landscape shifted into something darker, older. The trees grew closer together here, their branches creating a canopy that blocked out the rain and most of the light. The house appeared suddenly, rising out of the darkness like something conjured rather than built. It was massive, stone and iron and dark windows that reflected nothing. No warm glow from within, no sign of life, just the structure itself, imposing and absolute. Dominic pulled into a circular drive and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Last chance," he said, still not looking at her. "I can drop you at a hotel, give you enough cash to disappear for a while. You walk away, we never saw each other." Alara stared at the back of his head, at the rain hammering against the windshield, at the house waiting like an open mouth. Every instinct she'd been raised with screamed that this was wrong, that going inside with this man was the worst possible decision she could make. But those same instincts had led her to an altar tonight, had told her to be quiet and obedient and grateful for Marcus Thorne's interest. Those instincts had nearly destroyed her. "No hotel," she said. "They'd find me. They'll look here too." "Will they find me here?" Dominic's eyes met hers in the mirror again, and this time she saw something calculating behind them. A decision being made in real time. "No," he said finally. "They won't." He got out of the car and Alara watched him round the hood through the rain-streaked glass. He moved like water, smooth, inevitable, completely unbothered by the downpour that would have sent anyone else running for cover. When he opened her door, she half expected him to drag her out, but he just stood there, waiting. She stepped into the rain. It was colder than she remembered, or maybe adrenaline had been keeping her warm until now. Her dress immediately became impossible, the wet fabric wrapping around her legs like seaweed. She stumbled, and his hand caught her elbow, firm, impersonal, just enough to steady her. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then walk." He released her and headed for the front entrance, expecting her to follow. Alara did, because what else was there to do? Go back? Throw herself on Marcus's mercy? Beg her father to call off the engagement he'd arranged without ever asking if she wanted it? At least Dominic Cruz was honest about what he was. At least his danger was obvious instead of dressed up in promises and prenuptial agreements. The door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, 60-something, gray hair pulled back severely, wearing an expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice and been unimpressed both times. "Sir," her eyes flicked to Alara, taking in the dress and bare feet without reaction. "Shall I prepare a room?" "The east wing. Something with a lock." "Of course." The woman stepped aside and Alara followed Dominic into an entrance hall that could have swallowed her father's house whole. Dark wood, darker paintings, and a staircase that curved up into shadows. It smelled like old money and older secrets. "This is Teresa," Dominic said, shrugging out of his jacket and handing it to the older woman. "She'll get you whatever you need, clothes, food, a doctor if you're hurt." "I'm not hurt." "Then clothes and food." He was already walking away, heading toward a hallway that branched off to the left. "Don't leave the east wing. Don't try the doors you can't open. Don't make me regret this." "Wait," Alara's voice echoed in the cavernous space. "That's it? You're not going to ask me anything? Not going to—" "Not tonight." He paused, half-turned. In the low light, his face was all angles and shadows. "Tonight you dry off and sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk about why Marcus Thorne's bride is bleeding mascara in my car." He disappeared down the hall before she could respond, his footsteps fading into silence. Teresa watched her with eyes that had probably witnessed 1,000 terrible decisions and knew this was just another one to catalog. "This way, miss." Elara followed the older woman up the staircase, her feet leaving wet prints on wood that probably cost more per square foot than most apartments. The east wing was smaller than she'd expected, more contained. 4 doors along a hallway, 3 of them locked. Teresa opened the 4th to reveal a bedroom that looked like it hadn't been used in years, but had been maintained with obsessive care. Dark furniture, clean lines, a window that overlooked what might have been gardens but was currently just darkness and rain. "There are clothes in the wardrobe," Teresa said, moving to light a fire in the hearth. "They'll be too large, but they're dry. Bathroom through there. I'll bring food in 20 minutes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, miss." Teresa straightened, firelight catching in her severe features. "Just don't make me clean up blood tomorrow. I'm too old for that." She left, and Elara was alone for the first time since she'd climbed out her bedroom window 6 hours ago. The silence was enormous. She peeled off the wet dress and left it in a pile on the bathroom floor like shed skin, then stood under a shower hot enough to burn until her fingers pruned and her thoughts started to organize themselves into something resembling a plan. Except she didn't have a plan. She had one night, maybe 2, before reality caught up, before her father's investigators tracked her down or Marcus decided her public humiliation was worth making an example of, before whatever protection Dominic Cruz's name offered wore thin, and she had to face what she'd done. The clothes in the wardrobe were men's shirts and soft pants that had to be rolled at the ankle. They smelled like cedar and something else. Smoke, maybe, or gunpowder. She pulled on what fit and went back to the bedroom where Teresa had left a tray on the small table by the window. Soup. Bread. Water. No wine, no sedatives, nothing that suggested she was expected to be anything other than conscious. Elara ate mechanically, watching the rain sheet down the window glass, and tried to figure out what the hell happened next. She was still trying when exhaustion won, and she collapsed on top of the covers. Not quite asleep, but not entirely present either. Just existing in the space between, where wedding dresses dissolved into nightmares, and the sound of rain became her own heartbeat. Morning came gray and reluctant, filtering through curtains she didn't remember closing. Elara sat up, disoriented, and it took 3 full seconds to remember where she was. The bedroom, the east wing, Dominic Cruz's house. Someone had covered her with a blanket at some point during the night. She found fresh clothes laid out on the chair by the door. Women's clothes this time. Simple, but clearly expensive. Dark pants, a soft sweater, undergarments that were the right size despite Teresa having no reason to know her measurements. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like evidence of how thoroughly she'd been cataloged while she slept. The hallway was empty when she emerged, and she followed it downstairs, drawn by the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. They led her to a kitchen that somehow felt more lived in than the rest of the house. Worn counters, mismatched chairs, windows that looked out on what turned out to be actual gardens in the daylight. Dominic sat at the island, reading something on his phone. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark jeans, a black shirt rolled to the elbows, and looked like he'd slept 8 perfect hours despite the midnight rescue mission. Teresa was at the stove, doing something that involved eggs and violent efficiency. Neither of them acknowledged Elara until she cleared her throat. "Coffee?" Dominic asked, still not looking up. "Please." Teresa poured a cup and slid it across the counter. No cream, no sugar, no questions about how she took it. Elara wrapped her hands around the mug and tried not to feel like a specimen under observation. "Did you sleep?" Dominic set his phone down, giving her his full attention for the first time since last night. In daylight, he was less angular, more solid, the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller just by occupying them. "Yes, thank you." "Good." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit. We need to talk." Elara sat. The coffee was perfect, which somehow made everything worse. "Elara Voss," Dominic said. Her name in his mouth sounded like a judgment. Only daughter of Richard Voss, engaged to Marcus Thorne as of 6 months ago, after a courtship so brief it barely qualified as dating. Wedding scheduled for last night at St. Catherine's. You made it halfway down the aisle before you ran. She stared at him. "How?" "I made calls." He leaned back, studying her. Your father's already contacted the police. Missing person, possible kidnapping. He's offering a reward for information. Of course he is. Alara's laugh came out bitter. Can't let the merchandise wander off. Is that what you were? Merchandise? What else would you call it? She met his eyes. My father needed Thorne's political connections. Marcus wanted access to my family's money. I was the transaction that made it work. They didn't even pretend otherwise. And you agreed to it. I was 23 and convinced this was how things worked. That's not agreement. That's conditioning. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition, like he'd heard this story before in different words. So you ran. Smart move, terrible timing. Your father's already freezing your accounts. Your friends are giving interviews about how worried they are. Marcus is playing the devastated groom. Let him. Alara took a long drink of coffee, using the pause to steady herself. I'm not going back. Not my question. My question is, what do you plan to do instead? I don't know. It felt like a confession. I didn't think past getting away. Then start thinking. Dominic's voice was hard now, businesslike. Because right now, you're a liability. You're connected to powerful people who want you found. You're sitting in my house, and I need to know if that's going to become my problem. It won't. Alara set the cup down too hard, coffee sloshing over the rim. I'll leave. Today. You'll never hear from me again. And go where? I'll figure it out. With what money? She stopped. Because he was right, she had nothing. No access to her accounts, no credit cards that couldn't be traced, no friends who wouldn't immediately call her father if she showed up on their doorstep. The clothes she was wearing weren't even hers. That's what I thought. Dominic stood, picking up his phone. Teresa, get Alex on the line. Tell him I need a background check on the Thorne family. Everything. Finances, connections, what they had for breakfast last Tuesday. I want to know who we're dealing with. We? Alara's voice came out sharper than intended. There's no we here. I already told you this isn't your problem. It became my problem when you got in my car. He moved to the window, looking out at the gardens with his back to her. Marcus Thorne isn't going to let this go. Men like him don't. You embarrassed him publicly, broke a contract worth millions, and made him look weak. He'll come looking, and when he does, I need to know if he's stupid enough to knock on my door. He won't. But even as she said it, Alara wasn't sure. Marcus had always been careful, calculated. The kind of man who never made a move without knowing the outcome. But she'd never seen him humiliated before. Never seen what he looked like when something didn't go according to plan. You don't know that. Dominic turned back. Which means until I do, you stay here. East Wing, like I said, don't leave the property. Don't contact anyone. Don't give me a reason to regret picking you up. You're keeping me prisoner? I'm keeping you alive. His eyes were flat, unyielding. There's a difference. Teresa appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Alex is ready, sir. Dominic took the phone and left without another word, leaving Alara alone with Teresa and the ruins of her coffee. The older woman began clearing dishes with the same violent efficiency she brought to everything. He's not wrong, you know. Teresa didn't look at her. About Marcus Thorne. I've seen men like that. They don't forget. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting from something. Teresa paused, hands full of plates. Question is whether you're smart enough to accept it when it's offered. She disappeared into some back room, and Alara was left staring at the gardens through the window, trying to understand how she'd gone from one cage to another in less than 12 hours. The days developed a rhythm she hadn't expected. Mornings in the kitchen with coffee and silence. Afternoons in the library she'd discovered on the second floor, reading books that had probably been expensive when they were new and were priceless now. Evenings watching the sun set through windows that turned the gardens into something almost beautiful. Dominic appeared and disappeared like weather. Sometimes she'd find him in his office, a dark room off the main hall that smelled like leather and old smoke, working on things he never explained. Sometimes he'd join her in the library, reading his own book in the chair across from hers, not speaking but somehow making the silence companionable. Sometimes he'd be gone for days, and she'd only know he'd returned when Teresa brought up dinner for 2 instead of 1. On the 5th day, she found him in the gardens. He was in the far corner, past the formal beds and geometric hedges, in a section that looked like it was being reclaimed by wilderness. He had dirt on his hands and was doing something to a rosebush that looked half dead. "I didn't know you gardened," Alara said. He didn't startle. Probably heard her coming. "I don't. Teresa does. I just handle the things she can't kill." "Is that rose salvageable?" "Maybe." He cut away a blackened branch with pruning shears that looked older than him. "It's diseased. Probably should have been removed years ago, but it's the last one of its kind here, so we're trying." Alara crouched beside him, looking at the gnarled wood and sparse leaves. "Why?" "Because giving up is easier." He made another cut, cleaner this time. "And easy doesn't interest me." She watched him work, methodical, patient, completely focused on the task. It was the most unguarded she'd seen him. Out here, away from phones and responsibilities and whatever darkness he carried, he looked almost normal, almost human. "My mother planted gardens," she said. Not sure why she was offering this, just that the silence felt like it needed filling. "Before she died. Our whole backyard was flowers. My father tore them out after, said they were impractical." "When did she die?" "I was 8. Dominic made a sound that might have been sympathy. "Teresa lost her daughter around that age. Different circumstances, but same grief. She doesn't talk about it." "Does she talk about anything?" "When it matters." He sat back on his heels, surveying his work. "She's been with me 15 years. Knows where all the bodies are buried, literally and metaphorically. I trust her more than anyone." "Even more than whoever Alex is?" "Alex is different. He's loyal because I pay him. Teresa's loyal because she decided to be. There's a distinction." Alara pulled at a weed that had grown between the paving stones, its roots surprisingly deep. "Why did you really let me stay? It can't just be about Marcus coming after me." "Can it?" "No. You're not stupid enough to take in strays out of simple kindness. There's an angle here. I just haven't figured out what it is yet." Dominic looked at her then. Really looked, and she saw calculation behind his eyes. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. "Marcus Thorne has been expanding into territory that belongs to people I do business with. Nothing overt, nothing I can point to as aggression, but he's testing boundaries, seeing what he can take. And your leverage. You're proof that he can't control everything, that his perfect life has cracks." Dominic offered her a hand up, which she took despite herself. "I haven't decided yet if I'm going to use that leverage, but it's there if I need it. So I am a prisoner. You're a guest with strategic value." He dropped her hand once she was standing. "There's a difference." "Everyone keeps telling me there's a difference. I'm starting not to believe it. Then leave." He gestured toward the house. "Door's unlocked. No one's stopping you. Walk out, call your father, go back to Marcus. I won't interfere." Alara opened her mouth to say yes, she would. She didn't need this or him or whatever game he was playing. But the words wouldn't come. Because he was right, she could leave. Nothing was actually keeping her here except the knowledge that out there, beyond these walls, she had nothing. No money, no allies, no plan beyond blind hope. "That's what I thought." Dominic picked up the pruning shears and started back toward the house. "Dinner's at 7. Try to be on time. Teresa gets irritated when food gets cold." He left her standing in the garden, surrounded by roses that refused to die and weeds that wouldn't quit, trying to figure out if she'd just been threatened or offered protection. She was still trying when Marcus Thorne's car pulled up the drive. Alara didn't run. That was the first decision she made when she saw the black sedan pulling through the gates. She didn't run, didn't hide, didn't do anything that might look like fear. Instead, she walked toward the house with measured steps, her heart slamming against her ribs, but her face carefully blank. Teresa met her at the kitchen door, already moving with the sharp efficiency of someone who'd dealt with unwanted visitors before. "Inside, now." "Where's Dominic?" "Office." "He knows." Teresa practically pushed her into the hallway. "East wing. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone but me or him." Alara didn't argue. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her bare feet silent on the wood, and made it to her room just as she heard voices downstairs, Marcus's smooth tenor cutting through the house like a blade through silk. She pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. Didn't mean to intrude, Mr. Cruz. I just need a few minutes of your time. Dominic's voice was lower, harder to make out, but she caught the edge in it. The warning. Understand you might have information about. I don't discuss my guests. Dominic, clearer now. They must have moved into the entrance hall, and I don't appreciate unannounced visits. Of course. My apologies. Marcus didn't sound apologetic. He sounded like a man used to getting what he wanted through persistence alone. It's just that my fiancée has been missing for almost a week now. Her family is devastated. I'm devastated. And someone mentioned seeing a woman matching her description in this area. Lots of women in this area. Not many running around in wedding dresses during thunderstorms. Silence. Alara held her breath, waiting for Dominic to give her up, to make the rational choice and hand her over to avoid complications. It would be the smart move, the safe move. She was nothing to him except a complication he'd picked up in a moment of what? Curiosity? Boredom? Whatever it was, it couldn't be worth making an enemy of the Thorne family. I picked up a woman that night, Dominic said finally. Dropped her at a hotel downtown, the Meridian. Haven't seen her since. Which woman was this? Didn't catch her name, didn't ask. I'm not in the habit of interrogating people I help. Another pause. Alara could picture Marcus's face, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the calculation happening behind them. He was trying to decide if Dominic was lying, and if so, whether it was worth pushing. I see. Marcus's voice had gone quieter, more dangerous. Well, if you do happen to see her again, I'd appreciate a call. Her father is quite worried. As am I. I'm sure you are. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. I don't need your money, Thorne. Everyone needs something, Mr. Cruz. A shift in tone. Still polite, but with teeth showing now. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstanding between our families. My father has a lot of respect for your organization. It would be unfortunate if something disrupted that. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Alara is very important to me, to my family. We take care of what's ours. She's not yours if she ran. The silence that followed was different, charged, violent, the kind that happened right before someone did something irreversible. Alara found herself gripping the doorframe, ready to run downstairs and end this before it escalated into bloodshed. But then Teresa's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. Mr. Thorne, your car is blocking the service entrance. You'll need to move it. The tension broke. Footsteps, then the sound of the front door opening. Of course. My apologies. Marcus, smooth again, professional. Mr. Cruz, thank you for your time. If you do hear anything, I won't. The door closed. Alara waited, counting heartbeats, until she heard the sedan's engine fade down the drive. Only then did she unlock her door and venture into the hallway. Dominic was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't read. You heard. Most of it. She descended slowly, watching him. Thank you for not... Don't thank me yet. He turned toward his office. We need to talk. She followed him into the dark room she'd only glimpsed before. It was exactly what she'd expected. Heavy furniture, expensive liquor, walls lined with books that actually looked red. Dominic poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed her one without asking if she wanted it. He knows you're here, he said. Maybe not with certainty, but enough to be suspicious. That changes things. Alara took a drink. Whiskey, smooth and burning. How? Because now he's watching, which means I can't move you without him noticing. Can't send you away without him following. You're stuck here until he loses interest or finds another lead. He won't lose interest. No, he won't. Dominic leaned against his desk, studying her over the rim of his glass. Tell me about him. Not the public version, the real one. Why? Because I need to know what we're dealing with. Is he the type to cut his losses, or the type to burn everything down to get what he wants? Alara thought about Marcus, about the way he'd smiled when her father suggested the engagement, like he'd just won something valuable at auction. About the time she'd mentioned wanting to travel before the wedding and he'd laughed, actually laughed, like she'd suggested something charmingly impossible. About the night he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise when she'd pulled away from a kiss, then apologized so smoothly she'd almost believed it was an accident. "The second one," she said. "Definitely the second one." "That's what I thought." Dominic set his glass down. "Then we need to be smart about this. He can't prove you're here, but he'll keep looking, keep pushing. Eventually, he'll either find evidence or he'll do something stupid." "Like what?" "Like try to take you by force." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing weather. Men like Marcus don't handle rejection well. Add in public humiliation and a bruised ego, and you've got someone who's going to make bad decisions. "What do we do?" "We?" He raised an eyebrow. "I thought you didn't need protecting." "I don't, but apparently I need strategy." She met his eyes. "And you're the only one who seems willing to provide it. For a price. Everything has a price with you, doesn't it?" "Everything has a price with everyone. I'm just honest about it." Dominic picked up his glass again, swirling the liquid. "You stay here, you follow my rules, and when this is over, when Marcus gives up or finds something else to obsess over, you disappear. New city, new name, new life. I'll provide the resources. You provide the silence about where you've been." "That's it?" "That's it." It sounded too simple, too clean. But Alara was learning that nothing with Dominic Cruz was ever as straightforward as it appeared. There were layers here, calculations she couldn't see yet, but she was too tired to excavate them all tonight. "Deal," she said. They shook on it, his hand warm and calloused against hers, and she tried not to think about how this was the second contract she'd entered in less than a year. At least this one she'd chosen. The next 3 days passed in careful tension. Marcus didn't come back, but his presence lingered like smoke. Alara caught herself checking windows, listening for cars on the drive, jumping at sounds that turned out to be nothing. Dominic increased security. She saw new faces on the property, men who moved like they knew violence intimately and weren't afraid of it. On the fourth day, she found Dominic in the library, surrounded by papers that looked like financial reports. "What are you doing?" "Research." He didn't look up. Marcus's family owns a development company. They've been buying up properties in the warehouse district. "I know, it's supposed to be luxury condos or something." "It's money laundering." Dominic tapped one of the documents. "The numbers don't work. They're paying too much for properties that aren't worth half what they're spending. Which means they're hiding income somewhere." Alara sat down across from him, pulling one of the reports closer. The figures blurred together. Acquisition costs, projected revenues, investor portfolios. She'd sat through enough of her father's business dinners to recognize creative accounting when she saw it. "My father's involved in this," she said quietly. "His signature is on half these contracts." "I know." "So this isn't just about Marcus. This is about taking down both families." Dominic finally looked up. "Does that bother you?" "It should have." These were the people who'd raised her, fed her, sent her to expensive schools, and told her she was lucky. But they'd also sold her like property, ignored her when she said she didn't want this marriage, and were now hunting her down like she'd stolen something that belonged to them. "No," she said, "it doesn't." "Good. Because I'm going to need your help." "With what?" "You know these people, know how they think, how they operate. I need someone who can tell me where the weak points are, where they're vulnerable." Alara looked at the papers scattered across the table. Evidence of fraud, corruption, the kind of crimes that could dismantle empires if exposed correctly. She thought about her father's face when he'd told her about the engagement, all business and no warmth, about Marcus's hand on her back, proprietary and cold, about all the years she'd spent being decorative and obedient and safe. "The annual gala," she said, "they host it every year at the country club. Black tie, 500 guests, everyone who matters. It's in 2 weeks. What about it?" "Marcus will be there. My father will be there. All their business partners, all their investors, all the people they need to keep happy to maintain their reputation." She met Dominic's eyes. "If you wanted to make a statement, that's where you'd do it." Something shifted in his expression. Interest, sharp and focused. "Keep talking." "The gala is about image, about showing everyone that the Thorne-Voss alliance is strong and successful and unbreakable. If something happened to disrupt that, if someone showed up who wasn't supposed to be there, or information got released at exactly the wrong moment, it would destroy them. Not just financially, socially. They'd never recover." You want to go to this gala? I want to watch them burn. The words came out harsher than she intended, but she didn't take them back. They think I'm going to come crawling back, broken and apologetic. Instead, I want to show them exactly how wrong they are. Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her with that calculating look she was starting to recognize. That's dangerous. You'd be exposed, vulnerable. I'd be protected. You have enough men here to secure a small country. Surely you can handle one gala. It's not about manpower, it's about smart strategy versus emotional revenge. You're proposing the second one. I'm proposing both. Alara gathered the papers into a neat stack. We expose their fraud at the gala, in front of everyone they need to impress. We do it publicly, dramatically, in a way they can't spin or suppress. And I'm there to watch it happen. That's strategy and revenge. You've thought about this. I've had time. She stood, looking down at him. So, what do you think? Is it possible? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the armrest. Then he smiled. Not the careful, controlled expression she usually saw, but something genuine and slightly dangerous. It's reckless and vindictive and likely to create more problems than it solves, he said, which is exactly why it might work. They spent the next week planning. Dominic brought in Alex, a thin, nervous man who turned out to be some kind of information specialist, and together they built a case against the Thorne-Voss development scheme that would hold up in court, and more importantly, in the press. Forged contracts, falsified reports, payments to offshore accounts. It was all there, waiting to be compiled and released. Alara contributed what she could, names of investors who might turn on her father if the right pressure was applied, details about Marcus's personal finances that she'd overheard during what he'd thought were private calls, the password to her father's home computer that he'd never bothered to change. Each piece of information felt like cutting away dead wood, removing the rot so something new could grow. Teresa appeared one afternoon with a garment bag. For the gala, she said, hanging it on Alara's door. Mr. Cruz said you'd need something appropriate. Inside was a dress that made her breath catch, deep red silk that would fit like it was made for her, simple enough to be elegant but dramatic enough to be remembered. She ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the weight of what this represented. Walking into that gala wearing this dress meant declaring war. It meant choosing sides in a conflict she'd spent her whole life trying to avoid. She couldn't wait. The night before the gala, she found Dominic in the gardens again, working on the same rose bush. It looked better now, new growth starting to appear among the damaged branches. It's going to survive, she said. Maybe. Still fragile. He sat back on his heels, wiping dirt from his hands. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. I know. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with your father, with Marcus, with everyone in that world, it's finished. It was finished the moment I got in your car. Alara crouched beside him, looking at the rose. I just didn't know it yet. Are you sure? Really sure? Because you could still walk away from this. I could get you out of the city tonight. Mexico, Canada, somewhere they'd never find you. You'd be safe. I don't want safe. She met his eyes. I want them to know what it feels like to lose everything. I want them to understand that I'm not coming back. Not now. Not ever. And I want to watch their faces when they realize it. Dominic studied her for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw. If she looked different now than she had that first night, dripping and desperate in his back seat. She felt different, harder, more certain. All right, he said finally. Then we do this. They stood together, and Alara looked back at the house, at the place that had been a cage and a sanctuary, and now was something else entirely. A war room, a fortress. The place where she'd stopped being Richard Voss's daughter and Marcus Thorne's escaped bride and started being something new. She just hoped she survived long enough to figure out what that was. The gala was being held at the Grandview Country Club, a sprawling estate on the north side of the city where old money went to pretend it was still relevant. Alara had been there dozens of times, for weddings, fundraisers, her own engagement party. She knew every room, every entrance, every place where the security cameras had blind spots. Dominic's car pulled up to the valet stand at exactly 8 o'clock, fashionably late, but not suspiciously so. He'd cleaned up well, Black suit that probably cost more than her father's car, hair swept back, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. The valets recognized him immediately, their polite smiles going tight with nervousness. "Mr. Cruz, we weren't expecting you tonight. Last-minute decision." Dominic handed over the keys, then moved to open Alara's door before the valet could. "My associate and I had business to discuss." Alara stepped out, and the world seemed to slow down. The red dress moved like water, catching the light from the entrance in ways that made people turn and stare. She'd done her hair herself, swept up and elegant, a few pieces loose to soften her face, and wore makeup that made her look older, more dangerous. Not the sweet girl they remembered, something else. Someone gasped, then someone else. By the time they reached the entrance, a small crowd had formed, people whispering behind hands and pulling out phones. Perfect. The doorman, Gerald, who'd known her since she was 16, looked like he might faint. "Miss Voss, we weren't... Your father didn't mention... He doesn't know I'm here." Alara smiled, the expression all teeth. Surprise. They walked past him into the ballroom, and it was like dropping a stone into still water. Conversation stopped. Music faltered. 500 people in expensive clothes all turned to stare at the runaway bride who just walked in on the arm of Dominic Cruz. Alara scanned the crowd, looking for her father, for Marcus, for anyone who might try to remove her before this went any further. She found her father first, standing near the bar with a cluster of business partners, his face going from confusion to recognition to fury in the space of 3 seconds. He started toward her, and Dominic's hand settled on her lower back. Not possessive, just present. A reminder that she wasn't alone. Alara. Her father's voice was controlled, quiet, the tone he used when he was absolutely livid but couldn't show it publicly. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Attending a party. You used to love when I did that. Don't be smart. You need to leave, now." "I don't think so." She gestured to the room. "All your friends are here, your investors. It would be rude to leave so soon." Marcus appeared then, cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. He looked composed, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. "Alara, sweetheart." The endearment sounded like a curse. "We've been so worried. Are you all right?" "Never better." "You look well." His eyes flicked to Dominic, and something cold passed between them. "Mr. Cruz, I see you found her after all." Found her, protected her, kept her from making a terrible mistake. Dominic's voice was pleasant, conversational, and absolutely lethal. "You're welcome, by the way. I'm sure we can discuss this somewhere private." Marcus reached for Alara's arm, and she stepped back smoothly, putting Dominic between them. "No need. Everything important can be said right here." "Alara, I'm not coming back, Marcus. Not to you, not to this life, not to any of it. That's what you need to understand. I'm done." His face changed then, the mask slipping just enough to show what lived underneath. Rage, possessiveness, the absolute certainty that she belonged to him and had no right to choose otherwise. "You don't get to make that decision?" "Actually, I do. That's how freedom works." "You're making a scene." "Good." Alara raised her voice, projecting to the gathered crowd. "Everyone should know. The engagement is over. The marriage is over. Whatever deal you made with my father, it's finished." Gasps, murmurs, the sound of phones being raised to capture this moment. Her father looked like he might have a stroke. Marcus looked like he might commit murder. And Alara felt something she hadn't felt in months, powerful. Then Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted into something satisfied. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the noise with ease, "I apologize for the interruption, but I think you all need to see something." He nodded to Alex, who'd been waiting near the entrance. The man moved to the large screen at the front of the room, the one they usually used for speeches and award presentations, and suddenly it was lit up with documents. Financial records, offshore accounts, emails discussing falsified reports and fraudulent contracts. Everything they'd compiled, displayed for 500 witnesses to see. The room erupted. Her father moved first. He lunged toward the screen like he could physically tear down the evidence displayed there, but Dominic's security was already in position. 3 men in dark suits who materialized out of the crowd and blocked his path without laying a hand on him. "Don't," Dominic said quietly. "You'll only make it worse." You son of a bitch! Richard Voss's voice shook with rage. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. Dominic gestured to the screen, where Alex was methodically clicking through pages of incriminating documents. I've exposed 2 decades of fraud, money laundering through fake development projects, bribes to city officials, tax evasion on a scale that would make the federal government very interested. Those are fabricated lies. They're your signatures, your accounts, your emails. Dominic's smile was cold. And in about 30 seconds, they're going to hit every major news outlet in the city. By morning, they'll be national. The room had gone completely silent, except for the whispers and the sound of phones recording everything. Alara watched her father's face cycle through emotions. Denial, calculation, desperate searching for a way out. She'd seen that look before, usually right before he made a deal that sacrificed someone else to save himself. Marcus was different. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Alara with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Not watching the screen, not panicking like her father, just staring at her like she was a problem he was working out how to solve. You did this, he said. Not a question. I helped. Why? Because you never asked if I wanted to marry you. You just assumed. And when I ran, you hunted me like I was property you'd misplaced. Alara's voice was steady, clear. I wanted you to know what it feels like to lose control, to have your whole life dismantled by someone else's choice. We gave you everything. You gave me a cage with expensive furniture. She looked at her father, then back at Marcus. And I'm done living in it. Marcus took a step toward her, and this time Dominic moved. Not aggressive, just definitively between them. The message was clear. Walk away, Dominic said. While you still can. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Dominic pulled out his phone, showed Marcus something on the screen. Those are federal prosecutors. They've had these documents for the last hour. Warrants are being drawn up right now. By midnight, both your families will be under investigation. By next week, you'll be indicted. Walking away is the only option you have left. Marcus looked at the phone, and something in his expression finally cracked. Not defeat. Men like him didn't do defeat, but recognition. The understanding that this particular battle was lost. You think you've won, he said to Alara. You think this makes you free, but you've just traded one monster for another. He gestured to Dominic. You have no idea what he is, what he's capable of. I know enough. You know nothing. Marcus's voice dropped. But you will. And when you do, when you finally see past whatever story he's sold you, remember that I tried to warn you. He turned and walked toward the exit, and Alara felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief. It was too soon for that. But the first breath of something that might eventually become it. Her father was still standing there, looking between the screen and Dominic and Alara, like he couldn't quite process what had happened. Around them, guests were leaving in clusters, phones pressed to ears, already distancing themselves from the scandal. By morning, Richard Voss would have no allies, no business partners, nothing except his daughter's betrayal and his own exposed crimes. Alara. His voice had gone quiet, almost pleading. We can fix this. Whatever Cruz told you, whatever he promised me nothing. He just gave me the tools to fight back. I'm your father. You were my father. She felt the words settle, heavy and final. Then you sold me. And now we're done. She walked away before he could respond. Dominic's hand appearing at the small of her back again, grounding, steady. They moved through the rapidly emptying ballroom, past people who wouldn't meet her eyes, out into the night air that smelled like rain and gasoline and freedom. The car was waiting. Dominic held the door for her, and she slid inside, her hand shaking now that the adrenaline was starting to fade. He got in beside her, and they pulled away from the country club in silence. You all right? He asked after a few minutes. I don't know. Alara looked at her hands, at the tremors she couldn't quite control. I thought I'd feel different, triumphant or something, but I just feel empty? Yes. That's normal. Revenge doesn't fill the holes it's supposed to. Dominic poured something from a flask and handed it to her. But it does settle debts. She drank. Whiskey again, burning and familiar. What happens now? Now we wait. The prosecutors will move fast. They've been wanting a case like this for years. Your father and Marcus will lawyer up, try to cut deals, probably blame each other. It'll be ugly and public and take months to fully play out. And me? You disappear, like we agreed. New city, new name, new life. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow. Elara looked out the window at the city sliding past. The place she'd grown up, the streets she knew, all of it suddenly feeling like a coat that didn't fit anymore. Where? Wherever you want. I have connections in most major cities. Europe. If you want to go farther, just pick a direction. What if I don't want to disappear? Dominic turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. What are you saying? I'm saying I helped you take down 2 crime families tonight. I'm saying I have skills, knowledge about how these people operate, how to move in their circles without being noticed. I'm saying maybe I don't want to run anymore. She met his eyes. Maybe I want to stay and learn how to actually fight. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. At least this way I'd be choosing the danger instead of having it chosen for me. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he smiled, that genuine, slightly dangerous expression she was learning to recognize. We'd have to train you, properly. No more emotional decisions, no more revenge plays. You'd have to learn to think strategically, to see 10 moves ahead. I can do that. And you'd have to understand what my world actually is. Not the sanitized version. The real thing. The violence, the choices that don't have good options, the weight of power when it's not theoretical anymore. Show me. He nodded slowly, decision made. All right. But we do this my way. No shortcuts, no special treatment because you helped with tonight. You start at the bottom and work up. Deal. They shook on it again, and Elara felt something shift, not just in their arrangement, but in herself. She wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding. For the first time since climbing out her bedroom window 2 weeks ago, she was choosing a direction, instead of just fleeing in any available one. The car pulled up to Dominic's house, and Teresa was waiting at the door with an expression that suggested she'd watched the whole thing on the news. That was foolish, she said as they walked inside. It worked, Dominic replied. Foolish things sometimes do. Teresa looked at Elara. You're staying then? Yes. Then you'll need better clothes. That dress is lovely, but impractical for what comes next. She turned and headed toward the kitchen. I'll make coffee. You look like you need it. Elara followed Dominic to his office, where Alex was already set up with multiple screens showing news coverage of the gala. Every major outlet had picked up the story. Prominent families exposed in fraud scandal. Runaway bride returns with evidence. Federal investigation launched into Voss Thorn development scheme. It's everywhere, Alex said, looking pleased with himself. Trending nationally. The prosecutors are thrilled. They're saying this is the biggest white-collar case in a decade. Good. Dominic poured himself a drink. What about security? Any indication Marcus or Richard might try something stupid? Marcus left the city 2 hours ago. Private plane to his family's place in the Hamptons. Richard's holed up at home with his lawyers. I've got people watching both locations, but so far, nothing aggressive. Keep watching. They might be in shock now, but that'll wear off. When it does, they'll want someone to blame. Alex nodded and went back to his screens. Dominic turned to Elara, who was still standing in the doorway, trying to process that her entire world had just collapsed and rebuilt itself in the space of 3 hours. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow we start planning what comes next. I'm not tired. You will be. Adrenaline crash hits hard. He gestured to the chair. But if you want to stay, stay. Just don't fall apart when the reality of what you've done catches up. She sat, accepting the drink he poured for her, and watched the news coverage cycle through the same story with different anchors. Her engagement photo kept appearing, young, smiling, completely unaware of what she'd become. It felt like looking at a stranger. Do you regret it? Dominic asked. Which part? Any of it. Getting in my car, staying, tonight. Elara thought about it. Really thought about it, past the adrenaline and anger and fear. Did she regret destroying her relationship with her father? Burning every bridge to her old life? Declaring war on the man she was supposed to marry? No, she said finally. I regret not doing it sooner. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. What do you mean? You've been performing since you walked into that gala, playing the defiant runaway, the wronged woman, the victim who fought back. All of it true, but not complete. Dominic leaned against his desk. The real question is, now that the performance is over, who are you actually going to be? It was the question she'd been avoiding. Without her father's name, without Marcus's ring, without the entire structure of her old life. Who was Alara Voss? What did she want beyond revenge and freedom? What came after you burned everything down? I don't know yet, she admitted. Then figure it out. Because what comes next requires certainty, requires knowing what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not. This world doesn't forgive hesitation. He left her there with Alex and the news coverage and her own thoughts. Alara watched the screens for another hour until the same stories started repeating and exhaustion finally caught up with her. Teresa appeared with coffee and sandwiches, and they ate in comfortable silence while Alex typed away at something that was probably illegal. He's right, you know, Teresa said eventually, about needing certainty. This life. It's not like your old one. There's no safety net, no second chances if you make the wrong choice. Were you always this encouraging? I'm being realistic. You've had 2 weeks of safety here. Now you're asking to stay permanently, to learn things that will change you. I just want to make sure you understand what you're requesting. And what am I requesting? To become dangerous. Teresa's eyes were sharp. To stop being the person things happen to and start being the person who makes things happen. It's a one-way door, Miss Voss. Once you walk through it, you can't go back. I already can't go back. I made sure of that tonight. You burned bridges. That's different from building new ones. What Dominic is offering, it's not freedom. It's just a different kind of power. You need to decide if that's what you actually want. Alara looked at the screens again, at her own face staring back from a dozen different angles. The girl in those photos looked soft, uncertain, like she was apologizing for taking up space. She didn't want to be that person anymore. But Teresa was right. She needed to figure out who she wanted to be instead. I'll think about it, she said. Good. Thinking is smart. Teresa collected the empty plates. Now sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated regardless of what you decide. Alara made it to her room and collapsed on the bed, still wearing the red dress, too tired to change. Sleep came fast and heavy, pulling her under before she could overthink any of it. She dreamed about the wedding, about walking down the aisle toward Marcus, except the church kept getting longer and he kept getting farther away. She walked faster, then ran, but the distance never closed. Then Dominic appeared beside her, not saying anything, just walking at the same pace. And suddenly the church doors were ahead of them, thrown open to rain and darkness and freedom. She woke to sunlight and the sound of voices downstairs. When she checked her phone, it was past noon and she had 300 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. News outlets, probably. Reporters wanting a statement. She turned the phone off and went to find Dominic. He was in the kitchen with 2 men she didn't recognize, both wearing suits that looked expensive but not showy, both carrying themselves with the kind of alert stillness that suggested violence was a professional skill. Alara, Dominic gestured to the men. This is James and Carlos. They'll be handling your security until things settle down. I don't need security. You absolutely do. Marcus might be in the Hamptons, but he has people here. So does your father. You're the face of their humiliation. That makes you a target. One of the men, James, she thought, nodded. We'll stay out of your way, Miss Voss. You won't even know we're there most of the time. Except when someone tries to kill me? Especially then. He didn't smile. That's when you'll appreciate us most. Alara looked at Dominic. Is this really necessary? For the next few weeks, yes. After that, we can reassess. But right now, you're the most visible person connected to this scandal. That comes with risk. She wanted to argue, but she could see the logic. Just because Marcus had left the city didn't mean he'd stopped planning. Men like him didn't fold after one loss. They regrouped. They strategized. They found new angles. Fine, but they stay outside my bedroom. Wasn't planning otherwise. Dominic poured coffee and handed it to her. Also, you have decisions to make. I've had 3 offers this morning from people wanting to meet with you. What kind of offers? The first is from a publisher who wants to buy your story. 6 figures, guaranteed bestseller status. You'd have to do interviews, probably a book tour. No, I figured. The second is from a women's advocacy group. They want you to speak at their annual conference about escaping abusive situations. Marcus wasn't abusive. He was possessive, controlling, and forced you into an engagement you didn't want. That's abuse, just dressed up nicer. Dominic took a drink of his own coffee. But I told them you'd think about it. And the third? The third is from me. I have a business meeting tomorrow night. High level, sensitive. The kind where having someone who understands how wealthy families operate would be useful. You'd come as my associate, observe, maybe contribute if you see something I miss. You want me to work for you? I want to see if you can. There's a difference. He set down his cup. What we did last night was personal. This would be professional. No emotion, no revenge motivation. Just analysis and strategy. What kind of business? The kind you don't ask about until you're sure you want to know the answer. Alara looked at him, at the man who'd picked her up in a thunderstorm and kept her safe and helped her destroy everything she used to know. Marcus had been right about one thing. She didn't really know Dominic Cruz, didn't know what he was capable of beyond what she'd seen. But she also knew she trusted him more than she'd ever trusted Marcus or her father, and maybe that was enough. Tell me about the meeting, she said. Dominic smiled. It's a negotiation. Territory dispute between two organizations that both want the same dock access. I'm the mediator, which means both sides will lie to me, and I have to figure out what they actually want versus what they're pretending to want. And you think I can help with that? You grew up watching people lie at dinner parties, watching them smile while planning to destroy each other. That's exactly the skill set this requires. He stood. But you need to understand, this isn't the sanitized version of my world. These are people who solve problems with violence when negotiation fails. If you come to this meeting, you see that reality. You can't unsee it afterward. I understand. Do you? Because it's one thing to burn down your old life from a distance. It's another to watch someone get hurt right in front of you and know it's because a deal went wrong. Alara thought about the wedding, about her father's cold calculations, about Marcus's hand tight on her wrist. She'd spent her whole life in a world where violence was hidden behind closed doors and polite language. Maybe it was time to see what it looked like when people stopped pretending. I want to come, she said. Then we train today. You need to know how to read a room, how to spot when someone's about to do something stupid, how to stay calm when everything goes wrong. Teresa will help with the basics. James and Carlos will handle the rest. The next 24 hours were intense. Teresa taught her how to spot weapons under clothes, how to identify exits in any room, how to position herself so she could see threats coming. James and Carlos ran drills. What to do if someone pulled a gun, how to drop and cover, when to run versus when to stay still. It was exhausting and terrifying and exactly what she needed. By the time they left for the meeting the next evening, Alara felt ready. Not confident, that would have been stupid, but prepared. She wore simple clothes, dark and unremarkable, and kept her hair back in a way that wouldn't obstruct her vision. Dominic approved with a nod. The meeting was in a warehouse near the docks, which would have been ominous except Dominic had clearly chosen it. His people were everywhere, on the roof, near the exits, blending into shadows. Whatever happened inside, they controlled the space. Two groups were already there when they arrived, keeping to opposite sides of the empty warehouse floor. The first group was 4 men in expensive suits who looked like they ran legitimate businesses and committed crimes as a side venture. The second group was 3 men and a woman who looked like crime was the business, and everything else was cover. Dominic walked to the center of the space, and Alara followed, hyper-aware of everyone watching her. James and Carlos hung back but stayed visible, a reminder of whose territory this was. Gentlemen, Ms. Torres. Dominic's voice echoed slightly. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries and get to the actual issue. You both want Dock 17. Neither of you has exclusive rights. Fighting over it costs you both money and draws attention nobody wants. So we're here to find a solution that doesn't end in bodies. The man leading the suit group, older, silver hair, expensive watch, spoke first. We've been using that dock for 3 years. We have contracts with the shipping companies. Torres and her people are newcomers trying to muscle in on established operations. Newcomers with better rates and faster turnaround, the woman, Torres, replied. Her accent suggested she'd grown up far from here, but had worked hard to sound like she belonged. Your contracts are bloated and inefficient. We can move twice the volume in half the time. By cutting corners on safety and documentation. By not padding costs with unnecessary middlemen. They continued arguing, and Alara watched their body language. The suit group kept glancing at each other, coordinating responses. Torres's people stayed still, letting her talk. That told her something about their respective power structures. The suits operated by committee, Torres by command. She leaned close to Dominic. The suits are scared. They keep checking each other's reactions. Torres is the one with actual power here. He nodded slightly, acknowledging she was right. Here's my proposal, Dominic said, cutting through the argument. You split the dock. Different days, different times, coordinated through my people so there's no overlap. Torres gets weekdays. You get weekends and evenings. Both of you pay me a small fee for managing the schedule and ensuring nobody violates the agreement. That's not acceptable, the silver-haired man said immediately. We need consistent access. What you need is to stop losing money fighting over something neither of you can fully control. Dominic's voice went hard. This is the deal. Take it or explain to your investors why your next shipment got seized because you were too busy pissing on trees to notice the cops watching. The suits went quiet, conferring in whispers. Torres just smiled. I accept, she said, assuming the fee is reasonable. It is. Then we have a deal. She extended her hand and Dominic shook it. Then she looked at Alara. I don't believe we've met. Alara Voss. Recognition flickered. The runaway bride. I saw the news. That was smart work exposing your father like that. Took guts. Thank you. You working for Cruz now? Learning from him. Good. He's a bastard, but he's the smartest bastard in the room most days. Torres turned back to Dominic. Send me the schedule. My people will comply. The suits were still arguing among themselves. Finally, the silver-haired man stepped forward, looking defeated. We'll take the deal, but if there are any violations, there won't be. Dominic's tone made it clear the conversation was over. You'll both receive the schedule tomorrow. Follow it exactly. First violation gets a warning. Second violation costs you the dock entirely. Understood? Everyone nodded. The meeting broke up, both groups leaving through different exits, and Alara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. You did well, Dominic said once they were alone. I barely did anything. You observed. You analyzed. You told me what I needed to know. That's the job. He started toward the exit. Most people can't stay calm in a room with armed criminals. You didn't even flinch. Should I have? No. But most people would have. It means you might actually be built for this. They drove back in silence, and Alara processed what she'd just witnessed. A negotiation that could have ended in violence but didn't, controlled by nothing more than Dominic's reputation and strategic positioning. It was power without spectacle, authority without performance. The exact opposite of everything her father and Marcus had represented. She was starting to understand what she'd chosen. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm, different from before. Alara stopped being a guest and became something else. Student, asset, partner in training. Dominic put her through situations that would have terrified her a month ago, and she learned to read them like puzzles instead of threats. A tense negotiation over shipping routes. A meeting with a city councilman who wanted protection money disguised as consulting fees. A dispute between two restaurant owners that was really about who controlled the block. She learned to watch hands, not faces. To listen for what people weren't saying. To spot the moment a conversation shifted from negotiation to danger. Teresa taught her the practical skills. How to disappear in a crowd. How to change her appearance with minimal effort. How to carry herself so people either noticed her or didn't, depending on what the situation required. James and Carlos drilled her on security protocols until she could assess a room's vulnerabilities in under 30 seconds. But it was Dominic who taught her the hardest lessons. How to make decisions when every option was bad. How to live with the consequences of those decisions. How to separate what she felt from what needed to happen. 3 weeks after the gala, Alex burst into the library where Alara was reading financial reports from one of Dominic's shipping companies. We have a problem. Dominic looked up from his own work. What kind? Marcus Thorne just posted bail. The room went cold. Alara's hands tightened on the papers she was holding, creasing them. When? Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. 2 hours ago. His lawyers got him out on some technicality about the evidence chain. He's supposed to stay in New York, but my sources say he bought a plane ticket under a fake name. He's coming here. Shit. Dominic stood, already moving. Where's he landing? Private airfield north of the city. Flight comes in at 8 tonight. Alara checked her watch. 4 hours. What do we do? We prepare. Dominic was already on his phone calling someone. James, I need the house locked down. Full security protocol. Nobody in or out without my clearance. He listened for a moment. I don't care if it's the mayor. Nobody. He hung up and turned to Alex. I want to know the second that plane touches down, and get me everything you can on who he's traveling with. Already on it. Alex disappeared back to his screens. Dominic looked at Alara. You need to decide something right now. You can leave. I'll have you on a plane to anywhere you want within an hour. Or you can stay, but if you stay, you need to understand that this might get violent. Marcus isn't coming here to talk. I'm staying. Don't decide fast. Think about what that means. He's angry, humiliated, and probably desperate. Men in that state do unpredictable things. I said I'm staying. Alara met his eyes. He doesn't get to chase me away again. That's what he wants. For me to run, to prove I'm still the scared girl who climbed out a window. I'm not her anymore. No, you're not. Dominic's expression was unreadable. But being brave and being smart aren't always the same thing. Then teach me to be both. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, come with me. He led her to a part of the house she'd never seen before, a basement level that required 2 different key cards to access. The room beyond was part armory, part command center. Screens showing security feeds from every angle of the property, weapons locked in glass cases, maps and diagrams covering one wall. This is where we handle serious threats, Dominic said. Marcus coming here qualifies. If he makes it past the perimeter, if he gets inside, you need to know how to protect yourself. He unlocked one of the cases and pulled out a handgun. Ever fired one of these? No. Then it's time to learn. He checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, then handed it to her. This is a Glock 19, 9mm, 15-round magazine. Simple, reliable, hard to mess up. The safety is here. You point, you squeeze the trigger, you don't stop until the threat stops moving. The gun was heavier than she expected, colder. Holding it made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. I don't know if I can. You can, and you will if you have to. Dominic's voice was firm, but not unkind. I'm not saying you'll need to use it. I'm saying you need to know how, just in case. There's a difference between being willing to hurt someone and being capable of it. Tonight, you need to be both. They spent the next hour in a shooting range built into the far end of the basement. Dominic taught her stance, grip, sight picture, how to control her breathing, how to accept the recoil instead of fighting it. By the 6th magazine, she was hitting the target more often than not. Good enough, he said. You won't win any competitions, but you can defend yourself if it comes to that. Upstairs, the house had transformed. Men she'd never seen before were positioned at every entrance, every window. Teresa was securing the upper floors, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this before. James coordinated everything from the security room, his voice steady over the radio network. Alara sat in Dominic's office, the Glock in a holster at her hip that felt foreign and heavy. She'd changed into practical clothes, dark jeans, boots, a fitted jacket that wouldn't restrict movement. Her hair was back in a tight braid. She looked like someone ready for war. She felt like she might throw up. He's landed. Alex appeared in the doorway. Just got confirmation. 4 men with him, all armed. They're in 2 cars heading this way. How long? Dominic asked. 30 minutes, maybe less. Good. Let them come. Dominic checked his own weapon, then looked at Alara. Stay here. Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you get down and you stay down. Understood? Yes. I mean it, Alara. No heroics, no trying to prove something. You survive first, everything else second. I understand. He nodded and moved to the window, watching the drive. The sun was setting, turning everything orange and red, beautiful and violent at the same time. They waited. 28 minutes later, headlights appeared at the gate. 2 black SUVs, windows tinted, moving slowly up the drive like they owned it. They stopped in the circular entrance and 5 men got out. Marcus was the last, stepping into the fading light, wearing the same expression Alara had seen at the gala, cold, controlled, absolutely certain of his right to be here. Dominic walked out to meet them, and Alara followed despite his instructions to stay inside. She caught his look. Half irritation, half resignation, but he didn't send her back. Thorn! Dominic's voice carried across the drive. You're trespassing. I'm here for what's mine, Marcus gestured to Alara. Her. This ridiculous situation ends tonight. She's not yours. She was never yours. And the only thing ending tonight is your chance to walk away from this intact. Marcus smiled, and it was ugly. You think I'm scared of you, Cruz? You think your reputation means anything to me? I've spent the last 3 weeks in federal custody because of her. My family's business is destroyed. My father won't speak to me. All of it, every single consequence, is because she decided to throw a tantrum instead of honoring her commitments. I didn't commit to anything, Alara said. My father did, without asking me. Your father knew what was best for you. My father knew what was best for his bank account. Marcus took a step forward, and immediately 3 of Dominic's men appeared from the shadows, weapons visible. He stopped. This is how it's going to go, Marcus said. Alara comes with me, willingly or not. We get married, she makes a public statement about being confused and manipulated, and we start repairing the damage she's caused. In exchange, I don't press charges against Cruz for harboring a fugitive. I'm not a fugitive. I'm an adult who left an engagement I didn't want. You're a criminal who helped expose confidential business information. That's corporate espionage. You could go to prison for years. Dominic laughed. You're really trying that? The evidence we released was already being reviewed by federal prosecutors. Alara didn't steal anything. She just confirmed what they already knew. But nice try. Then I'll make something else stick. I have resources. I have patience. And I have nothing but time to make both your lives miserable until she does what she's supposed to do. Which is what? Be your wife? Pretend she loves you? Spend the rest of her life as proof that you can own people? Alara's voice was shaking, but not with fear. With rage. I'd rather die. That can be arranged. The moment shifted. One of Marcus's men moved his hand toward his jacket, and everything happened fast. Dominic's security closed in, weapons drawn. Marcus's people responded in kind. Suddenly there were 8 armed men in a standoff, and Alara was caught in the middle of it. Stand down, Dominic said quietly. All of you. Now. Nobody moved. I said stand down. His voice went hard. This is my property. My territory. You're outgunned and outpositioned. The only reason you're not dead already is because I'm giving you a chance to leave. Take it. Not without her. Marcus's eyes were fixed on Alara. I'm not leaving without what I came for. Then you're not leaving at all. Dominic pulled his own weapon, and the sound of it cocking was loud in the twilight. Last chance, Thorne. Walk away. For a moment, Alara thought Marcus might actually be stupid enough to try something. His hand twitched toward his belt, and she saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. But then he looked around, at Dominic's men positioned with clear shots, at the security cameras recording everything, at the situation he'd walked into without thinking it through. He lowered his hand. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Alara stepped forward past Dominic until she was close enough to see the anger in Marcus's eyes. I'm never coming back to you, never marrying you, never being what you think I should be. You can threaten, you can sue, you can waste the rest of your life trying to force me into something I'll never choose. It won't change anything. I'm done with you. You'll regret this. I already regret ever saying yes to you in the first place. Everything after that is just fixing the mistake. Marcus stared at her, and she stared back, refusing to flinch. Finally, he turned to his men. We're leaving. They got back in their SUVs and drove away, disappearing through the gates. Dominic's security stayed in position until the taillights vanished, then slowly lowered their weapons. That was stupid, Dominic said to Alara. Walking out here like that. I know. He could have shot you. I know. So why did you do it? Because I needed him to see that I'm not afraid anymore, that he can't control me through fear or threats or anything else. She looked at him. And because you taught me that power isn't about having the biggest gun. It's about knowing when to use it and when just showing it is enough. Dominic's expression softened slightly. You were listening. I'm always listening. They went back inside and the security detail began standing down, returning to normal positions. Teresa appeared with coffee and something stronger, and they sat in the office while the adrenaline slowly faded. He'll try again, Alex said. He'd been watching everything on the security feeds. Maybe not tonight, maybe not this week, but he's not done. I know. Dominic took a drink, which means we need to finish this permanently. How? Alara asked. By making you untouchable. Right now, you're exposed. No legal identity that's truly yours, no money that can't be frozen, no protection beyond what I'm providing. We need to change that. I'm listening. I can get you a new identity, real documentation, background, everything you'd need to start completely over, but that means erasing Alara Voss entirely. You'd be someone else, legally, financially, in every way that matters. What about my father, my family? What about them? Dominic's voice was gentle. They chose Marcus over you. They chose their reputation over your safety. Whatever you owed them ended the moment they refused to hear you say no. Alara thought about her father, about the house she'd grown up in, about photographs and memories that felt like they belonged to someone else now. There was grief there, but it was distant, abstract, like mourning a life she'd never actually lived. Do it, she said. Make Alara Voss disappear. You're sure? I'm sure. Alex nodded and disappeared, already working on whatever needed to happen to erase a person from existence. Dominic poured another drink and handed it to her. This is the point where most people break, he said. Where the reality of what they've chosen catches up and they realize they can't go back. If you're going to fall apart, now's the time. I'm not going to fall apart. Good. Because what comes next requires you to be solid. He paused. Marcus isn't wrong about one thing. You did help expose confidential information. That could come back as a legal problem if anyone decides to pursue it. The prosecutors have immunity deals for whistleblowers. They do. But you'd have to testify, publicly, against your father and Marcus both. That's not easy. Neither was running away in a wedding dress, but I managed. Dominic smiled. Fair point. All right. I'll have my lawyers reach out to the prosecutors. We'll see if we can arrange something that keeps you out of prison and puts them in it. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and documentation. The prosecutors were thrilled to have Alara's testimony. She knew details about the fraud scheme that their investigation had missed, could provide context that made the evidence damning instead of just suspicious. In exchange, they granted her full immunity and witness protection if she needed it. She didn't. Because while the legal system was slowly grinding toward indictments, Dominic was building something else. A new identity, yes, but also a new life. He brought her into more meetings, gave her more responsibility, started treating her less like a student and more like a partner. She was good at it, better than she'd expected. The skills she'd learned growing up, how to read people, how to navigate social hierarchies, how to appear harmless while calculating advantages, translated perfectly to Dominic's world. She could spot a liar from across a room, could tell when a negotiation was about to break down, could find compromise where everyone else saw only conflict. 2 months after the standoff, her father and Marcus were both indicted on multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The trials would take years, but the outcome was inevitable. Everything they'd built was gone. Alara watched the news coverage from Dominic's office, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, no regret, just the quiet certainty that this chapter was closed. How do you feel? Dominic asked. Free. Good. He handed her a folder. Your new identity. Birth certificate, passport, driver's license, complete financial history. As of today, Alara Voss doesn't exist. You're someone else now. She opened the folder and looked at the name there. It felt strange, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit yet, but she'd grow into it. What happens now? She asked. Now you decide what you want. You can take this identity and disappear. Start over somewhere nobody knows you. Or you can stay. Keep working with me. Build something new here. What do you want me to do? What I want doesn't matter. This is your choice. Your life. He paused. But if you're asking my opinion, I think you're wasting your potential if you leave. You're good at this. Better than most people I've worked with. And we work well together. Is that all this is? A good working relationship? Dominic looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them that had been building for weeks, but neither had acknowledged. The late nights in his office, the way he always positioned himself between her and danger, the fact that she'd stopped sleeping in the East Wing and started falling asleep in the library, only to wake up covered with a blanket she hadn't put there. No, he said finally, it's not all this is. Then what is it? I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing. Alara thought about everything that had led her here. The wedding she'd fled, the car she'd climbed into, the man who could have sent her away but chose to let her stay. She thought about who she'd been and who she was becoming. About the difference between being saved and being seen. I'm willing, she said. He smiled, and it was the first time she'd seen him look uncertain, vulnerable, human in a way he usually kept hidden. Good, because I've been trying to figure out how to say that for weeks without sounding like an idiot. You're Dominic Cruz. You don't do anything like an idiot. You'd be surprised. He stood, moving closer. I'm good at strategy, at reading situations, at controlling outcomes. But this, whatever this is between us, I don't know how to control it. Don't know if I want to. So don't. Alara closed the distance between them. Don't control it. Don't strategize it. Just let it be whatever it's going to be. That simple? Nothing about us is simple, but maybe that's the point. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Marcus's calculated touches or her father's political pleasantries. It was real and messy and certain all at once, and when they finally pulled apart, Alara felt like she'd crossed some invisible line she hadn't known was there. We should talk about this, Dominic said. About what it means, about how it changes things. Later. Alara pulled him back. Right now, I just want this. They stayed there until Teresa knocked on the door with food and pointed observations about terrible timing, and even then they didn't really separate, just shifted into something more sustainable. Partners. Equals. Whatever came next. The news broke 3 days later that Marcus had tried to flee the country and been arrested at a private airfield. His bail was revoked, and he went back into custody to await trial. Alara felt nothing when she heard. He was already irrelevant, a problem that had solved itself. Her father's trial started a month after that. She didn't attend, didn't need to. The prosecutors had everything they needed without her sitting in that courtroom watching him try to justify what he'd done. Instead, she was working. Dominic had given her control of one of his smaller operations, a legitimate consulting firm that provided cover for less legitimate activities. She was good at it, better than good. Within 6 weeks, she'd increased their client base by 30% and identified 2 opportunities for expansion that even Dominic had missed. You're a natural, he said one night, reviewing her reports. I should have put you to work earlier. You were busy keeping me alive. Fair point. He set the papers aside. I have a proposition. I'm listening. I'm expanding into new territory. Legitimate businesses, mostly. Real estate, shipping, consulting. Things that can operate in daylight without drawing attention. I need someone to run it. Someone smart enough to see opportunities and ruthless enough to take them. You want me to run your legitimate operations? I want you to build them. Make them bigger than what I have now. Make them untouchable. He paused. And I want to do it as partners. Equal stake, equal say, equal risk. Alara stared at him. You're serious? Completely. You've proven yourself 10 times over. This is the next step. What about us? What we are outside of business. That's separate. We keep them separate. Business is business. Personal is personal. They don't mix. He smiled. Well, they try not to mix. But we're both smart enough to manage it. This is crazy. It's strategic. You're good at this. I'd be stupid not to use that. And I'm not stupid. She thought about it. About building something from nothing. About having real power instead of borrowed safety. About being someone who made decisions instead of living with other people's choices. All right, she said. Let's do it. They shook on it, formal and binding. And Alara felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Alara Voss anymore. Wasn't anyone's daughter or anyone's almost wife. She was something new, something she was still defining, and that felt exactly right. The partnership papers were drawn up within a week. Her new identity held up under legal scrutiny. Within a month, they'd acquired 3 new properties and signed contracts with 2 major shipping companies. The money was legitimate, the operations clean, and for the first time in her life, Alara understood what it meant to build something that was actually hers. Marcus's trial ended with a conviction. 20 years, minimum security if he behaved. Her father got 15. She didn't watch the sentencing, didn't need the closure. They were already ghosts, and ghosts couldn't hurt her anymore. Instead, she was in Dominic's office. Her office now, too, redecorated with furniture she'd chosen and artwork she actually liked, planning their next acquisition. A warehouse complex near the docks that could be converted into mixed-use development. Profitable and legitimate, and exactly the kind of thing that would cement their position. "You're smiling," Dominic said. "I'm winning." "You are." He came around the desk, pulling her up. "And you look good doing it." "We look good doing it." "Even better." He kissed her, and it still felt new. Still felt like choosing instead of settling. "What do you want for dinner?" Teresa's threatening to make something involving too many vegetables. "Anything but vegetables." They went upstairs, and Alara caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked different now. Harder in some ways, softer in others. More certain, more herself. The girl in the wedding dress was gone completely, replaced by someone who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. She'd started this running from something. Now she was running toward it, building it, claiming it as hers. And she was just getting started. 6 months after the partnership was formalized, Alara stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and realized she'd stopped checking over her shoulder. The constant vigilance that had defined her first months with Dominic had faded into something more sustainable. Awareness without paranoia, caution without fear. She was drinking coffee at 7 in the morning, reviewing acquisition proposals, and the normalcy of it felt strange. "You're thinking too loud," Dominic said from the doorway. He was already dressed, ready for a meeting with investors who thought they were funding a shipping company and had no idea what else their money supported. "I'm thinking we should counteroffer on the Martinez property. They're asking too much." "Agreed. What else?" "That I haven't heard from my father in 4 months. Not since his lawyer tried to get me to visit him." Dominic moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. "You want to go see him?" "No, I just noticed the silence." She took a drink of coffee. "It's easier than I thought it would be, cutting them out completely." "That's because they were never really there. You just finally stopped pretending they were." He was right. The relationship she'd mourned wasn't actually a relationship. It was an idea, a performance they'd all agreed to maintain. Her father playing the concerned parent, Marcus playing the devoted fiancé, Alara playing the dutiful daughter. None of it had been real. Letting go of fiction wasn't grief, it was relief. "I got an email yesterday," she said, "from Torres. She wants to meet about a potential collaboration." "What kind?" "Didn't say. Just that she thought we might have aligned interests in the downtown development project." Dominic smiled. "She's testing you, seeing if you're actually running things or just window dressing." "What should I tell her?" "Tell her yes. Meet with her. Show her you're the real thing." He checked his watch. "I have to go. The investors get nervous if I'm late." "Good. Let them be nervous. They make worse deals that way." He kissed her, quick and familiar, then paused at the door. "By the way, Teresa wants to talk to you about something. Wouldn't tell me what. Said it was between you two." That sounds ominous. With Teresa, everything sounds ominous. She could be inviting you to lunch and it would sound like a threat. He left, and Alara finished her coffee before going to find Teresa. The older woman was in the kitchen, doing something violent to vegetables that probably didn't deserve it. "Dominic said you wanted to talk." "I do." Teresa didn't look up from her chopping. "Sit." Alara sat, recognizing the tone. This wasn't a request. "You've been here almost 8 months now," Teresa said. "You've changed, gotten harder, more focused. That's good. You needed that. But you're also starting to forget something important." "What's that?" "That this life, what you and Dominic have built, it's not sustainable forever. Eventually it catches up. The violence, the compromises, the constant calculating. It breaks people or it changes them into something they don't recognize." "Is this where you tell me to leave? To get out while I still can?" "No. I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I just want to make sure you know the cost." Teresa finally looked up. "I stayed in this world for 15 years after my daughter died. Told myself I was honoring her memory, that I was building something she'd be proud of. But really, I was just running from the grief, using the work to avoid feeling anything." "What changed?" "I met Dominic. He was 25, trying to take over his father's operation, making every mistake you can make when you're young and convinced you're invincible. I saw my daughter in him, Not literally, but the potential to become something better than what the world expected. So I stayed. Not for me. For him. Why are you telling me this? Because you're doing the same thing, using this work, this partnership, to avoid dealing with what you lost. Your family, your old life, whatever version of yourself you thought you'd become. And that's fine for a while. But eventually, you have to actually grieve instead of just staying busy. Alara wanted to argue, to say Teresa was wrong. But she wasn't. The frantic pace of the last 8 months, the deals, the meetings, the constant forward motion had been deliberate, had been about staying ahead of her own thoughts. I don't know how to grieve something I'm not sure I ever had, she admitted. That's the hardest part, mourning potential instead of reality. Teresa went back to her vegetables. Just don't let it poison what you're building now. Don't let what they took from you make you cruel to the people who are actually here. You mean Dominic. I mean everyone. Dominic, me, the people who work for you. It's easy to stop seeing people as human when you're trying to prove you're not weak. I've watched it happen too many times. I won't let that happen. Good. Because you're better than that. Better than what they tried to make you. Teresa's voice softened slightly. Now get out of my kitchen. I have actual work to do. Alara left feeling unsettled in a way she couldn't quite name. She spent the rest of the morning in meetings, one with their real estate attorney about the Martinez property, another with Alex about security protocols for a new shipping route. But Teresa's words kept circling back, insistent and uncomfortable. She was still thinking about it when she met Torres for lunch at a restaurant neither of them owned, but both had influence in. The woman arrived exactly on time, dressed like she was going to a board meeting or a funeral, and got straight to business. The downtown development project, Torres said once they'd ordered. You know about it. I know the city wants to revitalize 6 blocks, that they're taking bids from developers, that the money involved is substantial. It's more than substantial. It's transformative. Whoever controls that project controls downtown for the next 20 years. Traffic flow, business licenses, property values, all of it. And you want us to bid together? I want us to win together. My company handles construction. Yours handles financing and management. We submit a joint proposal that undercuts everyone else and delivers faster. We split the profits and the influence. Alara studied her. What's the catch? The catch is that City Council has to approve the bid, and 3 of the 7 members are in someone else's pocket already. Whose? Mitchell Hayes. He runs most of the gambling operations north of here. He's got political connections we don't, and he wants downtown to expand his territory. So we need to flip the council members. Or add our own. Torres smiled. I have a candidate. Young, clean record, actually cares about the neighborhood. She'd win a seat if she had funding and support. You want us to back a political campaign. I want us to invest in the future. She wins. We have a voice on the council. Hayes loses his advantage. Everybody wins except him. It was smart. Risky, but smart. The kind of long-term strategy that required patience and resources and the ability to think 5 years ahead instead of 5 days. I'll talk to Dominic, Alara said. I'm not asking Dominic. I'm asking you. You run the legitimate operations. This is your decision. It was a test, just like Dominic had predicted. Torres wanted to see if Alara had actual authority or if she was just playing business while someone else made the real choices. Then yes, Alara said. We'll back your candidate, but I want to meet her first and I want quarterly reports on how the campaign funds are being used. We're partners, not blank checks. Torres' smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. People who give away money without conditions are usually stupid or desperate. You're neither. They worked out details over lunch, funding amounts, timeline, what Torres' construction company would need to get started the moment the bid was approved. By the time they finished, Alara had committed close to $2 million to a political campaign for someone she'd never met and a development project that wouldn't break ground for at least a year. It should have felt reckless. Instead, it felt exactly right. She told Dominic about it that evening, expecting questions or pushback. Instead, he just nodded. Good call. Hayes has been expanding too aggressively. He needs to be reminded there are boundaries. You're not worried about the risk? Risk is how you grow. Playing it safe is how you stagnate. He pulled her closer. Besides, I trust your judgment. If you think this is worth it, it probably is. That's a lot of faith in someone who was running away in a wedding dress 8 months ago. That someone is gone. You're someone else now, someone better. He kissed her forehead. I see it even if you don't yet. 3 weeks later, Alara met Torres's candidate, a woman named Sarah Chen who'd grown up in the neighborhood they were trying to revitalize and had specific, detailed plans for what development should actually look like. She was smart and passionate and completely inexperienced in politics, which made her either perfect or doomed. I'm not going to lie to you, Sarah said at their first meeting. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never run a campaign, never dealt with donors or strategists or any of this. But I know what this neighborhood needs, and I'm tired of watching people who've never lived here make decisions about our future. That's exactly why you'll win, Alara said. People are exhausted by politicians who sound polished but don't mean anything. You mean something. We just have to make sure enough people hear it. They hired a campaign manager, rented office space, started organizing volunteers. Alara found herself at strategy meetings and fundraisers, learning a different kind of negotiation than what she practiced with Dominic. This was about persuasion instead of power, about building coalitions instead of controlling territory. It was harder than she expected and more satisfying. Sarah won her primary by 8 points. The general election was closer. Hayes poured money into her opponent, ran attack ads that bordered on defamation, tried everything to prevent her from taking that council seat. But Torres's construction workers canvassed every block. Alara's financing kept the campaign solvent, and Sarah's actual belief in what she was fighting for cut through all the noise. She won by 3 points, close enough to be terrifying, wide enough to be legitimate. The development bid went through 2 months later. Hayes tried to block it, but he'd lost his advantage. The project was approved, contracts were signed, and suddenly Alara found herself with a stake in reshaping an entire section of the city. It was power, yes, but it was also responsibility. The kind that kept her up at night wondering if they were actually improving things, or just replacing one version of control with another. You're overthinking it, Dominic said one night when he found her reviewing building plans at 2 a.m. We're creating jobs, improving infrastructure, making the neighborhood safer and more valuable. That's not exploitation, that's development. It's both, it's always both. Alara set the plans aside. We're profiting from changing how people live. That comes with obligations. Which you're meeting, the affordable housing units, the community spaces, the local hiring requirements, that was all you. You're doing this right. I hope so. She leaned against him, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Sometimes I wonder if I'm becoming what I ran away from, just a different version of people who use power to get what they want. You're nothing like them. They use power to control people. You're using it to build something. There's a difference. Is there? Or is that just what we tell ourselves to sleep at night? Dominic was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I've been asking myself that question for 15 years. Haven't found an answer I'm completely comfortable with. That's not reassuring. It's honest, which is worth more than reassurance. He turned her to face him. You're going to make mistakes. We both are. The power we have, it's too much to wield perfectly. But you have something most people in our position don't. What's that? You actually care if you're doing harm. That matters. It doesn't guarantee you won't, but it means you'll try not to. That's the best any of us can do. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was probably the truest one she'd get. The development project broke ground in early spring. Alara stood at the ceremony with Torres and Sarah and a dozen other people who'd made this happen, watching bulldozers tear into pavement that had been crumbling for decades. It felt symbolic in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Dominic appeared beside her, not part of the official ceremony, but present anyway. Always present when she needed him. This is yours, he said quietly. Your first major project. How does it feel? Terrifying. Like I'm responsible for whether this works or becomes another broken promise to people who've heard too many already. You are responsible. That's the job. He took her hand. But you're not alone in it. Remember that. The work continued through summer and into fall. Buildings went up, infrastructure improved, local businesses started moving in. It wasn't perfect. There were delays and cost overruns and complaints from residents who hadn't wanted change. But it was happening, reshaping itself block by block into something different. Alara spent less time in meetings about shipping routes and more time in community sessions about development planning. She learned to listen to people who had nothing to gain from lying to her, who just wanted their neighborhood to be livable. It was humbling and exhausting and necessary. You're spending a lot of time on this project, Dominic observed one evening. They were having dinner, an actual dinner, not food grabbed between meetings, and she'd been distracted all through it. It matters. I know. I'm just making sure you're not losing yourself in it. What does that mean? It means you've been working 70-hour weeks for 3 months. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. And Teresa's worried, which means I'm worried. I'm fine. You're not. You're driven. There's a difference. He set down his fork. What's really going on? Alara tried to find words for something she hadn't fully acknowledged to herself. I think I'm trying to prove something. That I can use power without becoming what I hated. That I can build something that actually helps people instead of just enriching myself. That everything I went through, running away, destroying my family, choosing this life, that it meant something. It already means something. You don't have to prove that, don't I? I took everything my father built and burned it down. I ruined Marcus's life. I chose this world, your world. And I need to believe that choice makes me someone better than they were. Not just different, better. You are better. You were always better. That's not something you have to earn. Then why does it feel like I do? Dominic reached across the table, taking her hand. Because you're human. Because trauma doesn't just disappear when you get what you want. Because Teresa was right. You've been running from grief by staying busy, and eventually that catches up. I don't know how to stop. Then don't stop. Just slow down. Let other people carry some of this. Delegate the things that don't require you specifically, and actually rest occasionally instead of treating sleep like a weakness. You're one to talk. You work as much as I do. I've been doing this for 15 years. You've had 8 months. There's a difference. He squeezed her hand. I'm not telling you to quit. I'm telling you to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You have to last. She knew he was right, knew she'd been pushing too hard for too long, but stopping felt like admitting defeat, like proving that Teresa's concerns were valid. Still, she tried. Started delegating more. Hired an assistant to handle scheduling and coordination. Made herself leave the office by 7 instead of working until midnight. It felt wrong at first, like she was abandoning something important. But gradually, the space she created filled with other things. Dinners with Dominic that lasted more than 20 minutes. Conversations with Teresa that weren't just status updates. Time to actually think instead of just react. She started sleeping better, eating regularly, noticing details she'd been too busy to see before. One afternoon, she found herself in the gardens with nothing particular to do and no crisis demanding attention. The rose bush that Dominic had been nursing back to health was thriving now, covered in blooms that were almost violent in their redness. It survived, Teresa said, appearing beside her with gardening shears. Against all odds. Like us. Like you. Teresa started deadheading spent flowers with practiced efficiency. You've come a long way from the girl who showed up here in a ruined wedding dress. Sometimes I barely recognize her. Good. She was drowning. You're not. No, I'm not. Alara touched one of the roses, feeling the velvet softness of the petals. Teresa, can I ask you something? Always? Do you think people can really change? Fundamentally, I mean. Or do we just become better at hiding what we've always been? Teresa was quiet for a moment, considering. I think we're always who we've always been at the core. But we get to choose which parts we feed, which parts we let grow, and which parts we starve until they're too weak to control us. Your father fed his greed and his need to control. You're feeding something different. That's not hiding, that's choosing. What if I choose wrong? Then you choose differently next time. That's what growth is, getting better at making the next choice, even when the last one was wrong. Teresa looked at her directly. You're going to make mistakes, probably already have, but you'll survive them because you're stronger than you think and less alone than you feel. It was exactly what Alara needed to hear, even if she didn't know she needed it until Teresa said it. That evening, she told Dominic about a decision she'd been avoiding. I want to visit my father. He didn't look surprised. Why? Because I need to see him, not to forgive him or reconcile or any of that, just to close the loop, to prove to myself that he doesn't have power over me anymore. When? Next week, before I can talk myself out of it. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know. I'm coming anyway.
The prison was exactly as depressing as she'd expected. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the kind of institutional emptiness that made everything feel temporary and pointless. Her father looked smaller than she remembered, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of custom suits, all the power and certainty stripped away. They sat across from each other with a table between them and a guard watching from the corner, and for a long moment neither spoke.
You look well, her father said finally. His voice was the same, but quieter, defeated in a way she'd never heard before.
I am well. I heard about your development project. It's getting good press. It's getting results. The press is secondary. Still, he folded his hands on the table. I'm glad you're doing something productive, that you landed on your feet after everything. I didn't land on my feet. I built new ground to stand on. There's a difference. He nodded, accepting the correction. I suppose there is. Silence again. Alara waited, refusing to make this easier for him. I owe you an apology, he said eventually, for the engagement, for not listening when you tried to tell me you didn't want it, for choosing my own interests over your happiness. Yes, you do. I'm sorry. The words hung there, and Alara felt nothing. No relief, no vindication, no satisfaction, just the simple recognition that an apology without changed behavior was just noise. I appreciate you saying that, she said, but it doesn't fix anything. Doesn't undo what you did or who you chose to be. I know. Then why say it? Because it's true. Because I've had a lot of time to think about the choices I made and I don't like what I see. Because you're my daughter and I failed you and that matters even if you don't forgive me. Alara looked at this man who'd raised her and realized she felt nothing for him. Not hatred, not love, not even pity. Just the neutral observation of someone who used to matter and didn't anymore.
I hope you use your time here to become someone better, she said. Not for me. For yourself. Because the person you were, he didn't make anyone happy. Not even you. What about you? Are you happy? She thought about it honestly. I'm building toward it. Learning what it looks like. That's better than what I had before. With Cruz? You're really choosing that life? I'm choosing my life. Dominic is part of it. So is the work we do. So is the person I'm becoming. She stood. I hope you find something worth living for in here, but I'm done carrying the weight of your mistakes. That's yours to handle now. She left without looking back, and Dominic was waiting in the corridor like he'd promised. How was it? He asked. Necessary and final. She took his hand. I'm ready to go home. They drove back in comfortable silence, and when they arrived at the house, Alara felt something settle inside her. This was home now. Not the place she'd grown up, not the life she'd been promised, but this strange, complicated, imperfect situation she'd built from nothing. She thought she might actually be happy. Not perfectly, not without complications, but genuinely happy in a way she'd never been before. The thought was interrupted by Teresa appearing with an expression that suggested news. What? Dominic asked. Marcus Thorne was found dead this morning. Apparent suicide in his cell. The room went cold. Alara felt her breath catch, waiting for grief or guilt or satisfaction. Instead, she felt tired. Just profoundly tired of the violence and waste and unnecessary destruction that seemed to follow men like Marcus everywhere they went. How? She asked. Details aren't public yet, but early reports suggest he'd been struggling with the reality of his sentence. 20 years was more than he could handle. Dominic looked at Alara. Are you all right? I don't know. She sat down heavily. I should feel something, right? Relief or grief or something, but I just feel empty. That's normal. He was part of your life for a long time, even if that part was toxic. You're allowed to be complicated about it. I wanted him to live, to serve his sentence and maybe become someone different. Not this. I know. Dominic sat beside her. But you can't control what other people choose. You can only control yourself. Teresa brought tea and left them alone with their thoughts. Alara drank mechanically, processing what Marcus's death meant. The engagement that had defined so much of her life was now permanently closed. No chance for redemption or growth or change, just a final period on a story that should have had a different ending. Do you ever wonder, she said quietly, if we could have done things differently? If there was a way to destroy what they'd built without destroying them? All the time. But wanting a better answer doesn't mean one exists. Dominic took her hand. They made choices that led them here. You made different choices. You can't carry the weight of their decisions and yours. Teresa said something similar. Teresa's usually right about these things. They sat together until the sun set, until the news cycled through its coverage of Marcus's death and moved on to other tragedies, until Alara felt ready to stand up and keep moving forward. Life continued. The development project finished its first phase on schedule. Torres's candidate pushed through zoning reforms that made future development easier and more community-focused. Hayes lost influence and eventually got indicted for tax evasion, removing another obstacle from their path. Alara and Dominic's partnership expanded into new territory, both business and personal. They bought a second property together, this one outside the city where they could escape when things got too intense. They started planning larger projects, thinking in terms of years instead of months. And one morning, 3 months after Marcus's death, Alara woke up feeling different. Not sick exactly, but off in a way she couldn't quite identify. She ignored it for a week, then 2, until Teresa cornered her in the kitchen with a knowing look. "When was your last period?" Alara stopped mid-coffee pour. "What?" "Your last period. When was it?" "I don't—" "Why are you asking?" "Because I've seen that look before. The exhaustion, the sensitivity to smells, the way you're avoiding coffee even though you love it. You're pregnant." The words landed like a physical blow. Alara sat down hard, coffee forgotten. "I can't be." "Why not? You and Dominic aren't exactly careful." She stopped because Teresa was right. They weren't careful, hadn't been for months. "Oh God. Breathe. It's not the end of the world." "It might be. We haven't talked about this." "Then talk about it now, before you spiral into panic." Teresa pulled out her phone. "I'm texting Dominic. He should be here for this." "Don't." Too late. Teresa had already sent the message. 15 minutes later, Dominic appeared, looking concerned. "What's wrong?" Alara looked at Teresa, then back at him. "I might be pregnant." He went very still. "Might be?" "Teresa thinks I am. I haven't taken a test yet." "Then let's take one." He was already moving. "Alex can get one here in 10 minutes. Dominic, we need to know, one way or another." He looked at her, his expression careful. "Unless you don't want to know." "I want to know. What if I am? What does that mean for us, for the work we're doing, for everything we've built?" "It means we adjust, adapt, figure it out together." He took her hand. "But first we find out if we actually need to adjust." Alex appeared with 3 different pregnancy tests because apparently overkill was his default setting. Alara took all 3 into the bathroom and waited the longest 3 minutes of her life, while Dominic paced outside the door and Teresa made herself busy in the kitchen. All 3 tests came back positive. She walked out and showed them to Dominic without words. He looked at the results, then at her, and she couldn't read his expression. "Say something," she said. "I'm going to be a father." His voice was strange, like he was testing the words. "We're going to have a child." "Are you okay with that?" "I don't know yet. Ask me again in a few hours." He pulled her close. "Are you?" "I don't know either. This wasn't the plan." "Plans change. We're good at adapting." They told Teresa, who looked satisfied in a way that suggested she'd known before either of them. They called off all meetings for the rest of the day and spent it talking through logistics and fears and possibilities. How would they protect a child in their world? How would they balance parenthood with the work they'd built? What kind of parents would they even be? "We'll figure it out," Dominic said for the 10th time. "Just like we've figured out everything else." "This is different. Everything's different. That's never stopped us before." The pregnancy became public knowledge within their organization quickly. Teresa told James and Carlos because they needed to know for security reasons. Alex found out because he overheard a conversation, and from there it spread. Torres sent champagne and a note that said, "About time." Sarah sent flowers and congratulations. Even some of Dominic's less legitimate associates sent gifts, which was both touching and slightly concerning. The months that followed were strange. Alara's body changed in ways that felt foreign and inevitable. The development project continued, but she had to delegate more as exhaustion and doctor's appointments took up time she used to dedicate to work.
Dominic became almost obsessively protective, upgrading security and checking in constantly and generally driving her crazy with concern. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she said after he'd called to check on her for the third time in 2 hours. "I know, this is new territory for both of us, but you have to trust that I can still do my job." "I do trust you. I'm just terrified." "Completely." She softened. "Me too. But we're doing this together, remember?" "Together. Right." He sounded like he was reminding himself. The baby, a girl, they found out at 20 weeks, became real in increments. First the heartbeat, then movement, then the growing reality that they were about to be responsible for an entire human being. It was terrifying and overwhelming and somehow exactly right. Alara worked until her 8th month, until even Teresa told her to stop being ridiculous and rest. She spent the last few weeks reading parenting books and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Dominic converted one of the spare rooms into a nursery, painting it himself in colors they'd chosen together. "You're nesting," Teresa observed. "I'm preparing." "You're nesting. It's cute." Labor started 3 days before her due date, in the middle of the night like some cosmic joke. Dominic handled it with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything else, getting her to the hospital while somehow simultaneously coordinating security and calling the doctor and not visibly panicking. The actual birth was messy and painful, and nothing like the sanitized versions she'd seen in movies. But when they finally placed her daughter in her arms, small and perfect and screaming, Alara understood something she'd never quite grasped before. This was what it meant to build something worth protecting. They named her Elena, after no one in particular. Just a name they both liked that didn't carry anyone else's history. She was perfect in the way all babies are perfect, and terrifying in how completely vulnerable she was. "We're responsible for keeping her alive," Alara said on the second night, holding Elena while she slept. "For making sure she grows up safe and happy and good. How do we do that?" "Carefully and probably imperfectly." Dominic was watching them both with an expression she'd never seen before. "But we try. That's all anyone can do." The first few months were chaos. Sleepless nights and constant feeding and the overwhelming responsibility of keeping another human alive. But somewhere in the chaos, something settled. They found rhythms that worked. Teresa became an unofficial grandmother, showing up with food and advice and the occasional sharp observation about their parenting choices. James and Carlos became protective uncles, treating Elena like she was made of glass. Alara went back to work slowly, part-time at first, then gradually increasing as they found childcare they trusted. The development project completed its second phase. Torres's candidate won re-election. Their legitimate empire continued growing, branching into new territory and new opportunities. And through it all, Elena grew, rolling over, then crawling, then taking her first steps. Each milestone felt simultaneously ordinary and miraculous. On Elena's first birthday, they threw a party that was half celebration, half business gathering. Sarah came with her family. Torres brought an elaborate cake. Alex gave Elena a stuffed animal that probably cost more than most people's rent. Even some of Dominic's less savory associates showed up with gifts and genuine affection. Alara stood watching it all, her daughter laughing as Teresa entertained her, Dominic discussing business while keeping one eye on Elena at all times. The strange family they'd built from nothing, and felt something she'd spent her whole life chasing, finally settle into place. This was what she'd been running toward, not away from her old life, but toward this one. The complexity and mess and imperfect beauty of building something that mattered. Later, after the guests had left and Elena was asleep, Alara and Dominic sat in the gardens where they'd had so many important conversations. The rose bush was still thriving, still producing blooms like it was making up for all those years of almost dying. "Do you ever regret it?" Dominic asked. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" "Never." Alara leaned against him. "Do you?" "Not once. You're the best decision I've made. You and Elena both. Even though it's messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying. Especially because of that. Easy things aren't worth having." He kissed her head. "What are you thinking about?" "That I spent so long being who other people wanted me to be. My father's perfect daughter, Marcus's convenient bride. And then I ran away and became someone different, someone I actually chose to be." "And?" And I think I'm finally comfortable with who that person is. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but mine. Actually mine. That's all any of us can hope for. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds and thinking about the future. There would be more challenges, Elena growing up, new business complications, the constant balancing act of their world. But they'd face it together, the way they'd faced everything else. The next morning, Alara woke to Elena's babbling from the nursery and went to get her. As she picked up her daughter, feeling the solid weight of her, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The wedding she'd fled, the car she'd climbed into, the man who'd let her stay, the empire they'd built, the life they'd created. She wouldn't change any of it, not the fear or the violence or the difficult choices, not the grief or the growth or the slow understanding of who she actually was. Because all of it, every messy, imperfect, terrifying piece had brought her here, to this moment, to this life, to this family that looked nothing like what she'd been promised, but was exactly what she'd needed. Elena grabbed her face, demanding attention, and Alara laughed. "All right, little one, let's go find your father and start another day." They went downstairs together, into the house that had been a sanctuary and a prison, and finally just a home. Dominic was already in the kitchen with Teresa, both of them arguing about something that probably didn't matter. They looked up when Alara entered, and whatever they'd been discussing was immediately forgotten. This was her family, strange and complicated and built from choices rather than blood. Not perfect, not even close, but real in a way nothing else in her life had ever been. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.